pull this soup together. I just realized as I did my opening that I didn't have my wireless mic on. I do have it on now, so I do hope that the audio came out okay. But now I'm going to show you what you need in order to pull this soup together and to make this soup for your family. So very easy ingredients, and in most cases you may have everything at home. I used about 1 medium-sized onion and did chop it, or rather it looks like diced. You'll need about 5 eggs, 4 to 6 eggs, depending on how much soup you're making. I'm making a big batch. I'm going with 5 eggs. You will need some fresh tomatoes. In this case, I had 3 fresh tomatoes. I may need to augment it. I'll show you in a minute what I may augment it with, depending on whether it's enough. I do like that tomato egg taste. These are Roma tomatoes, but really any good tomato will do. Of course, the eggs. I will be using minced garlic. You can use 1 clove. You do not want to over garlic this. The garlic should be a hint in the background and not very forward. I'm going to thicken the soup with some cornstarch. I'm going to use some all-purpose spice seasoning. I'm going with the Red Hot, some white pepper. I will be using some vinegar in this case, white vinegar, some soy sauce. I do have some salt. I do have some chicken broth, and if you have homemade stock, that is even better. And if I need, or if I feel I need more tomatoes, I have my trusty can, always in the pantry, of diced tomatoes. These happen to be petite diced tomatoes in some type of tomato juice, but this is all you'll need to make egg drop tomato soup, or tomato egg drop soup. You can call it what you like. So, now to start pulling together our recipe. I've already shown you that I chopped 1 medium-sized onion, so I have that here ready to go. For the tomatoes, I just gave them a rough chop. So you can see I cut the tomato into chunks, about this size or so. A rough chop. You don't have to dice them. They don't have to be that small. And in fact, they'll kind of disintegrate once you put it in the on the stove and in the pot, but you do want to give them a bit of a rough chop. So this is about as rough as I usually get with these tomatoes. And one thing that I do like to do before I cook with tomatoes or do anything with tomatoes is once I have them cut to the chunk size that I want, doesn't matter what I'm using fresh tomatoes with, I do sprinkle them with a little bit of coarse ground sea salt, because the sea salt really brings out the acidic juices and the flavor of the tomato. And then I let those chunks and I let the tomato sit with that sea salt for a few minutes before I actually put it in the pot to start my cooking process, or before I start mixing in anything else. I find it really makes a difference. And I've noticed that lots of the chefs and others that I watch on their YouTube channels cook, they do the same thing. So I think it's something that it's not necessarily a pro tip or a secret, but it's just something that many people like to do. And in this case, I have my coarse ground sea salt. I'm going to put it over these tomatoes. You also find that it really pulls out the juices, and you typically don't have to salt much of the soup after, because depending on the type of broth you use, you may be using, for example, low sodium broth or no sodium broth or a broth with salt. And then you always want to make sure you taste it before you add anything else. We're going to take these tomatoes, we're going to take the chopped onions, and I am going to take this garlic over to the pot I have on the stove and show you what we do first. Okay, so I am at the stove now, and the first thing I'm going to do is take a little bit of this vegetable oil and put it in the bottom of my soup pot. Of course, to do that I have to take the cover off. And it's not as easy to take off as I thought. Now my hands are getting greasy, it'll never come off. I think this is a screw top one. All right, there we go. So you really want to cover the bottom of the pan, not a ton of oil, but enough, because the next thing you're going to do is give it a minute or so to heat up. And I'm going to go and get a spoon. I'm going to put in my diced onions. And right now, I am going to make sure I use at least medium to high heat, because I do want the onions and the oil to mingle a bit. See if I've got enough in here. Well, gonna make sure I have enough, because the next thing that I'm going to do, and it has been about 5 to 10 minutes since I took the chopped tomatoes and since I added a little bit of the coarse sea salt. So the salt has been on the tomatoes for about 10 minutes or so, maybe a little more. And I am also putting that in the pot now. I do think I have enough oil, and I'm going to let that kind of soften and get mushy. And before I really leave it and let it kind of go, I'll take the equivalent of about a quarter clove of garlic, which in here is about a half teaspoon-ish, and I will add a half teaspoon of garlic. As I mentioned, you don't want to use too much garlic and be that garlic forward with this. I'll show you what the pot looks like inside. And now that I have the garlic, the tomato, and the onion in there, I really want it all to soften, and I'll be giving it a couple of good stirs along the way. So you can see the tomatoes. Put some light in here, and the onions. And you want to kind of mash that up and make sure it all gets soft. I can smell it. It smells really, really good. Don't be afraid to poke at it and get the onions kind of mushy. We do want that pasty mush from the tomato to also come through, because this is going to be the basis for your soup. Continuing to watch this soften, and I would estimate that I'm going to let this kind of go for at least 5 to 6 minutes, and then after that we'll begin incorporating the additional ingredients. Okay, so I get the pot here, and you can see how tasty it looks. It's not enough tomato. I am here we go. That's again, what I would say 10 cups of soup. I'm using a big pot, so we get as much point. And I'm about to add this 48 ounces. So I'm going to see the pot and everything. I think I can make about 48 so that I can make a nice big pot of soup. I made this even just you know, a quarter cups of, you don't have to find, especially if you're making this during the week, it's comfort food, so you can actually prepare it after you get home from work or, you know, on a school night. Okay, so as you can see, I'm going to lower this now because it did simmer for a bit. And while it's simmering away, I'm going to add the all-important cornstarch that will thicken this soup to get it to that luxurious texture. I'll actually do it so you can see it. I'm putting the cornstarch that I mixed with some water. That was, I'd say about 3 tablespoons of cornstarch or so, and about a quarter cup maybe of water, but it's really up to you. You just want to make sure that you use enough to thicken this soup. I can feel it thickening already. You can probably see it. And now we'll let this go to a rapid boil, and it'll be time for our eggs. Okay, and now you can see that we have our soup basically at a rapid boil, and this is after I've put the cornstarch. You can see that it's got that shiny kind of thick sort of flavor. And now it's time for the eggs. And one secret about the eggs is you really want to stir the soup. And the secret to getting the eggs to be ribbony and lacy and look a bit like you're used to in the egg drop soups or soups that have eggs in them, like the hot and sour soup at Asian restaurants, is you want to pour that egg mixture into the middle of this vortex that you create here. And it's almost magical when you do it right. So let me get this soup going round and round. And now I will add the lightly, I say lightly, whisked eggs. There you go. Oh, there's something really, really magical about watching it actually happen. Kind of get that ribbony, lacy look. Wow, there it is. And I am lowering the heat, making sure it is low. See how it gets to this point? So unctuous looking, so velvety. And it tastes that way too when you do it. And it comes out perfect like that. And once you get to this point, you just kind of let the egg settle. And now it's time to add the remaining seasonings. And following the seasonings, it's time for a final taste test as well. So what you want to do now is add about a tablespoon or two of soy. You want to add about the same of vinegar. You can use any vinegar. I'm going to add a dash of this red hot seasonal or seasoning blend. You can use any seasoning blend that you like. Anything will do. And a little bit of white pepper, not a ton. White pepper is actually quite strong, and it's become that flavor that's most associated with the hot and sour soup. I like my food savory, so I like sour, peppery tastes. But what I've shown you here will keep it on the lighter side. You can certainly add more if your family enjoys more savory foods. Or you can certainly leave it as is and let everyone add anything extra that they need to make the soup fulfilling and delicious for them at their bowl. I'm going to let this simmer just for a minute. In the meantime, I'll get a separate spoon here so I can taste the broth. Let's give this one a shot. Now for my taste, it does need a little more salt. Salt will bring out the flavor of the onion and the tomato. I'm using the coarse ground kosher. And for my taste, I am adding a little bit of red hot. You can add any hot oil, hot sauce, or simply a little more of a dash of the white pepper. The white pepper, little goes a long way with this stuff. So, add a, half teaspoon or something and then check it out. And it's going to depend on the size of the pot you make. Okay. This should be just about done. Okay, so this soup is a wrap. I did my final tasting, and for me and for my taste, it is perfect. Let me show you what this looks like. A little bit like, I don't know, like egg drop soup, like hot and sour soup, and like tomato soup. The ribbons of eggs. Wow, this is a great, great soup. And there's the finished soup. You can see the textures. The ribbony eggs, the diced tomatoes, chicken stock, chicken broth, and that delicious oniony flavor.